Okay, so I think we are all set. So welcome everyone. It's great to see you all here today at Preservation Connecticut's talking about preservation. This is our winter series of noontime chats, and we're excited to start off this series with our statewide partners, Connecticut Landmarks. So I'm Jane Montanaro, Executive Director, Preservation Connecticut, and we have a great staff at Preservation Connecticut. It's Chris Weedman, our Deputy Director. Renee Tribert is Places. Getting a little bit of feedback. Is everyone on mute? Renee Tribert is our Making Places and Preservation Services Manager. Jordan Sorensen is our Development Director and Special Projects. Kristen Hopewood is our Development Assistant. And we have 3 circuit riders, Mike Farino, Brad Scheid, and Stacy Vero, who are our boots on the ground. And many of you probably have had them visit your sites or come to your meetings, visited your home. They are our technical fields service who assist everyone, individuals, municipalities, developers, anyone who's a steward of a historic property. Our circuit riders are out in the field to serve you. So Preservation Connecticut is the statewide nonprofit historic preservation organization. We were established in 1975 by a special act of the Connecticut General Assembly, and to preserve, protect, and promote the buildings, sites, and landscapes that contribute to the heritage and vitality of Connecticut communities. One of our missions is to provide educational programs like we're doing today, and to give you an opportunity to ask any preservation questions on your mind, and to get to know some of our preservation partners who are doing excellent work in the field. So we encourage you to use the chat function to ask any questions, or at the end of the program, we'll open it up to be a little more conversational, and you can speak up and join the conversation. These programs are designed to hear from you, so anything that you have on your mind, please feel free to ask away. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to our friends at Connecticut Landmarks, Aaron Marcavitch, the Executive Director, and Robert Brock, Deputy Director.
Hit that mute button, right? Thank you, Jane. I appreciate the invitation for us to speak today. As a new arrival on the Connecticut preservation scene, I'm excited and thrilled to meet and connect with preservation activists and enthusiasts around the state. I'll tell you a little bit more about my background in just a minute. Things have been such a swirl of confusion and weirdness over the last year. I don't know that I completely realized that this would be happening at the exact same moment as the inauguration, but hey, here we are. I don't mind at all if any of you are cheating out of one eye to keep an eye on the screen as things happen. That may be happening here as well. I'm glad others will get a chance to view this later. And for anybody that is viewing this later, you should feel welcome to reach out to myself or Bob with any kind of questions. But for those of you who joined us today, I thank you for taking the time, and look forward to your questions. Next. So first, I'd like to start with what Connecticut Landmarks is. Well, maybe what aren't we first? What aren't we is a state agency. We're a private nonprofit stewardship organization, museum organization. And some of you may know us by our former name, the Antiquities and Landmark Society. That was started in 1936, 85 years ago, by a group of people who were seeing major changes in the landscape around and wish to protect some of the most historic sites in the state. I will fully admit that that was a very white, very male group at the time, something that we're still reckoning with today. The mission, as it's been written, is Connecticut Landmarks uses its historic properties to inspire an understanding of Connecticut's history. So I take that and I have reinterpreted it here. We are stewards. We're responsible for a unique set of homes and landscapes, and it's our job to take that stewardship of those sites and inspire our visitors to create connections to the past. We have to engage them, not speak directly at them. We have to bring them into the conversation and then find ways to take that and make it actionable. How do you carry forward the story of a place like Palmer Warner that we show here and create action from it? That was an LGBT couple who were really leaders in, one of them was a leader as a preservation architect in the 1930s and 40s. How do we make action out of that? This is what I understand to be our goal. I'll tell you more about how we do that, but if you'd allow me for a moment or two, I'll give you my background, followed by some background from Bob. Next. In a very broad way, this is my background. I'm most recently coming from an organization just outside of Washington, D.C. We had been there for a decade doing regional scale heritage work, partnership development. We did fundraising and funding programs. It was in some ways closer to maybe what Preservation Connecticut does than anything else. But if any of you know things like the Last Green Valley Heritage Area or the Upper Housatonic Heritage Area, or some of those national heritage areas, it was based very similar to those. My background is a degree in historic preservation from Roger Williams University, as well as a master's degree in public history from Middle Tennessee State, where I studied under a professor who was very big into the heritage areas movement. But also during those times, my main research topics were amusement parks, leisure, roadside architecture, really cool things like that. So I've been told that, well, I've already traveled down the Berlin Turnpike, but I'm going to study that a little bit more in depth. And if you Google my name out there, you'll find out that I put together one of those Arcadia phototype books on the history of US 1 in Maryland. So I've moved essentially just up US 1 and will continue to study US 1 with an eventual goal that maybe in my grayer years, I'd like to see a Route 1 museum come together. So a lot of work around that. But again, 20 years of doing this in nonprofit management and heritage tourism. So I'm taking things from a very partnership standpoint and a connectivity standpoint in looking at our organization. So Bob, if you want to give a few moments of your background.
Sure. Thanks everyone, and I'm glad to see all you here today. I joined Connecticut Landmarks 2 years ago, January of 2019. Actually, it's 2 years ago, actually next week. So I'm still relatively new, but we're glad to be back in New England. I spent the previous almost 12 years in St. Louis. I was I come here really from the visitor experience operations side, of museums side of the house here. I spent the last 5 years there as director of visitor experience at the Missouri Historical Society, which operates 3 different institutions in St. Louis, one being the Missouri History Museum, the second being the Soldiers Memorial Military Museum, and our research and our research center, actually, all 3 which are open to the public. So prior to that, I worked for several years in city and state government in Massachusetts, followed by a fairly short stint in the private sector. But, my heart has always been in the public sector and particularly in nonprofits. So we're glad to be back in New England. I grew up in Massachusetts and I have family that, all throughout Connecticut. So I'm really pleased to be back here. So, and I'm, really pleased to be taking on the challenges that we're doing here at Connecticut Landmarks. So, next, please.
Thank you, Bob. And we do have about 7 staff, some grant funded, a mixture of staff, marketing and interpretation within the organization, as well as our site administrators. And then we have a whole range of part-time seasonal interpreters that we hire in as well. And you may see some of those if anybody's looking for a fun summertime interpretive job. So quite a mixture. Next, please. And you will be hearing plenty from Bob in the next slides, because he really manages all of our stewardship efforts and oversees them. So we'll kind of tag team back and forth off of each other throughout this. A quick rundown of our sites. Our first purchase that we still own was the Joshua Hempstead House in New London. We started that purchase in 1936, but didn't really finish it until 1941, after we had already purchased the Butoff Williams House. The Butoff Williams House is jointly managed between us and the Webdean Stevens Museum. I'm looking really forward to working with another new face to the region, Joshua Torrance, to really see if we can make that site a much more exciting and interesting place and utilize it in unique ways. After those first couple of houses, we began receiving sites through bequests. And we still receive bequests, but tend to be kind of picky, I guess you might say. We obviously prefer cash over the sites if we can help it. And but we like to work with groups like Preservation Connecticut to make sure that those sites are protected. So if somebody were to come to us with a house and look to contribute it, we'd probably be looking at things more like easements and opportunities like that, rather than acquiring new sites. So that's sort of a change from how we used to operate. One of the first bequests that we received was the Hail Homestead. Having the state's hero house is a real pleasure and honor, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And you can see some of the other houses that have come through in time, including the most recent, the Amos Bull House, which was the State Preservation Office for quite a long time. And we'll touch on most of the rest of these. Many of you have probably been to them, but we'll touch on them in various ways through the rest of the slides. We like to give you a sense of how we have these 12 sites. Next, please. I will note that the core of our work is stewardship. I've mentioned it several times. We're honored to have received these sites that represent a variety of periods and eras in the history of the state. But stewardship obviously means that ongoing preservation work, managing collections, ensuring our guests have a great experience. And actually, that's going to be a lot of what we talk about today is what is the guest experience? Can we make it better? Is there better ways to support them? Are there different things that we should be doing? Are sites really reaching the guests in the way that we should? And so as part of that, the sites went through a process of reinterpretation based on sites of conscience training. If you've not heard of them, they're an international network of sites that represent sort of complex history, different stories. How do we tell those, and how do we have a better communication about those stories? We've also been working to make sure that our connections to our communities is much stronger. We steward, we support guests, we interpret, we market, and we communicate. So we're both a stewardship and preservation organization and a museum organization at the same time. So that it might sound like a bifurcation, but I really see that as two hands working together to lift it up. And I really hope that, with Bob being here and now my entry, I hope that we can continue to make it better as we go. So next, we will immediately address what some may consider to be the elephant in the room, and that we had a bit of a brush with the Office of Attorney General. I don't know if the slide, nope, there it is. Okay, great. Nope, yep, go ahead up to the next one there. I don't know if it's, oh, there it is. Great. So we had a brush with the Office of Attorney General because the organization was thought to have misused endowments related to a site, Forge Farm near Stonington. But the Office of Attorney General found no wrongdoing, but really encouraged us to make sure that we had a stronger preservation schedule and better communications with our partners. We're doing both, and we'll continue to make them better. One of the reasons, among others, that Bob was brought in was to support that stewardship work, and has led it amazingly. And we're just going to show you a couple of quick slides of Forge Farm to show you what was done. But I will note that both, as you had just heard, Bob and I are new, so we may not have all the specifics and details. And if you'd like to discuss them further, I would just encourage you to get in contact with us afterwards. The house itself was built circa 1750, but in reality, by the time it came into our possession, it had been significantly changed, and really has gone through quite a lifetime. It's still rather imposing sitting up on that hill. Next slide, please. So Bob, if you'll mention a little bit about some of the restoration work that happened at the site.
Sure. When the slide continues, you'll notice that we spent a fair amount of time, CTL spent a fair amount of time on both the interior and the exterior of the house, completely restoring the interior. We used a gentleman, a craftsman named Dean Roy, who did a lot of the interior work, and a gentleman from Yankee Restoration named Mike Einsteidel, who did a lot of the exterior, and he rebuilt the corn crib. So, you know, the amount of time that we spent on this project, which was primarily had started in late, I believe, sort of the fallish of 2018, and finished, we had an open house for the residents of Stonington in April of 2019, a couple of months after I started. So, and it was just the finishing touches were being put on at that particular time. So, you know, we spent several months restoring the property, and to the point where it looks wonderful. It really does. We have two full-time tenants in. We use it as a rental property now. And, you know, we do open it we have the right to open up to the public one time a year. So, you know, again, we gave the residents of Stonington and the surrounding area, you know, two opportunities. We spent two full afternoons in April and in June of 2019 showing off the results and the work that he had done. So it's really been a real asset, I think, to the landscape down there in Stonington, if you ever have a chance to see it. Next, please. That's a shot of the interior. That's the which would be the sort of the parlor area, and it would face the front of the house. Obviously the floors were completely restored, and you know, again, the interior has been modified, has been modernized, if you will, you know, to be brought up to code, so you know, residents can actually live in there. But again, the exterior is it just looks tremendous. It does. Next,
and Bob, maybe mention the partnership we have with a farm next door.
Oh, very good point. We have an agreement with a farmer. There's I forget how many acres up the hill from the property. There's a barn, a working farm that we entered into a partnership with a few years ago, and it's been a real asset for both ourselves and the individual that runs that particular operation. So, you know, we're pleased to see that, you know, the reaction has been really good from both the residents and, you know, the surrounding area down there, because, you know, Forge Farm is, you know, it has a lot of long ties to the people in Stonington, and, you know, they see that property as really as one of their own. So it was really important that we, you know, we do the right thing and get it squared away.
And I did ask, I wondered how often the cows got loose. The tenant said only on occasion does she look up from her kitchen sink and see a cow wandering through. But that has been working out pretty well.
Little miniature cows too. It's a different species of cow, and I don't even know what it is, but they're the funniest little animals. They're really small, little puppy sized almost. So anyway.
Absolutely. So that one is operating as a rental. It just, in terms of visitor experience, that sort of situation just wasn't there to make it work the same way. All right, go ahead next. Another project that has been going through some major restoration work has been the Bellamy Faraday House and Garden. Portions of the site were built as early as 1754, although we do a lot of interpretation around residents that are more around the turn of the 20th century. This project's been a major part of Bob's work over the last year, and so I'll hand it back to you, Bob.
Sure. Again, the Bellamy Faraday project, or the house rather, is located in Bethlehem, which is out in Litchfield County. It's been a huge draw for our visitors, largely due to not just the history of the house, but a series of really, really highly successful books written by a woman by the name of Martha Hall Kelly. So fans of the protagonists in the books have come out to the site in droves over the last 3 or 4 seasons. But along with that, we were seeing that this particular site, like I guess a few others back in the late 90s, were dealing with the use of, or trying to remove the use of lead paint back in the day. And in 1999, when this property was last painted, it was a type of encapsulated paint was used, which essentially, in the words of a preservation architect that I really respect, it's as if this coating it's as if you took saran wrap and wrapped the entire house in it. It was unable to breathe. So what basically happened with these layers of encapsulated paint is that the house is essentially drowning, and we were seeing the paint bubble all over the place. Moisture bubbles were popping, where you could actually, in some cases, slice off some of the bubbling, and water would come out. So removing that encapsulated paint was a question that was really confounding CTL staff for years. And this past year, we finally made the decision that we have to start this. We have to do whatever it needs to be done to take care of this. So, after looking at a bunch of different contractors and several different options as to how to remove this encapsulated material, we decided on it. We chose a vendor earlier in the spring, and work began in June of this past year, where the entire house was stripped, which took a lot longer than even the contractor believed it would. And in
Go to next.
Yeah, I think it's the next slide. I forget. So stripping the paint took probably at least almost 3 months. There's a really good shot of it. But in the interim, as we were finding, we really had no idea what we were going to find under those paint layers. And in some cases, the wood was warped. It was rotten in some cases. So we ended up replacing about just under 100 linear feet of wood clapboard, along with rebuilding some shutters, reglazed all 82 windows, to the point where, unfortunately, weather and the fall and time sort of caught up with us, and we weren't able to finish it this past season. So we're about 95% finished with the project. We expect to get right back at it as soon as the weather breaks in March and April. But the sections where it does look, where it has been completed, it's almost night and day. It just is. So
go ahead to the, next one is just another look.
Yeah, that's a good shot. That's a good shot of it's off the parlor, actually, of just some of the painstaking work that the contractors had to spend just literally stripping clapboard by clapboard. And some came off a little bit easier than others, but it's a project that was really 20 years in the making. And we're hopeful that once this is finished, it's going to give us a good, say 20 years before we have to, invest in it again. Go ahead.
And then another one.
Yeah.
So this is close to finished.
Yeah, close to finish on. This would be if you're familiar with the site, this would be the south side of the house, which looks out over one of the side lawns towards the middle of center of Bethlehem. So this is without its shutters up there as well. So It's you know, it's a tremendous project. We were really happy. Our board of trustees was fully behind it. Our membership has been great behind it. So it's taken up you know, a good part of our attention over the past year. So as soon as we open for the season hopefully in May, we should be up and squared away and ready to welcome people to essentially what is a brand new house on the outside.
Yeah. We only found one giant nest of bees that had to be taken care of while we were up there. So, and before we move on from this, you know, if you haven't been to Bellamy Faraday, I encourage you to go there, learn about Carolyn Faraday's legacy, see the gardens. I encourage folks to take a walk through the land trust property that's right next door. If you like old cemeteries, there's a great old cemetery up there. Some of you may know Martha Hall Kelly's books, the Lilac Girls, which are based around this. Another one will be coming out this year. So we hope to be able to have some programming around that. But before we move on from Bellamy Faraday, we do have another project inside that is just getting underway. For the next slide, Bob.
Yes. Sort of to tag team on our two major projects, both which happen to be at the same house at the same time, is there's been, for those of you who may have gone through Bellamy Faraday in the past, there are really three areas that have seen wallpaper deterioration over the years, whether it's caused by, there's many different theories. There were theories that, you know, there were beeswax that was bleeding through, and then there was, you know, some water damage and others, you know, other spots. The bottom line is that, you know, we need to, you know, essentially take action with that. So we have launched phase one, which will be a 3-phase project over the next 3 years to restore the historic wallpaper in that particular house. And, you know, those of you who may be familiar with it, the wallpaper in there, it dates from the 1950s. So what we're trying to do, and what we are doing actually, is that's a picture of our collections manager, Aaron Farley, right there, who is stripping off sections of the old paper. We are digitally reproducing the wallpaper with a designer who's based up in New Hampshire. So that's basically phase one, which is the entryway and then the stairway leading up to the second floor. Phase two will take place in what we call Caroline's bedroom. So it's actually Caroline Fairley's bedroom, which is probably one of the most popular rooms in the entire house. That would be phase two, and again, duplicating the paper to, you know, obviously to keep with the historic essence of the house, is really a painstaking project. Just peeling that paper off is just it's tailor-made for, as I like to laugh, tailor-made for somebody like Aaron Farley here, who kind of loves that sort of thing. And then the third phase will take place in 2023, which is another pattern that leads from the front of the house all the way down a hallway to the back of the house. So again, the support of our board is huge here. The support of the Faraday Fund is very big here, because again, it's a painstaking project that will minimally impact, I think, some of our visitor services topics. But as I like to say, I think it's a real opportunity to really educate the public on, you know, what's necessary and the resources that are needed to keep these sites, you know, in pristine condition. So it just doesn't happen, you know, automatically. It needs to take place. So I really see it as, and I've talked to our board about it, it's a real opportunity to educate people on really the finer points of and what's involved in preserving these properties.
Great. Let's go ahead to the next one. So this is another project that's a bit older at this point, is this great postcard that I found when I was doing some research on Route 1. This came out of the Kitchener Brother collections at Boston Public Library, if you're looking for old postcards. The Hale Barns and L, and the Hail Homestead is circa 1776. And the Hail Homestead is the most visited site in our collection, with no real endowment to speak of. So that means we have to get creative about our earned income. Educational visits, school visits are a big part of that, and another big part is facility rentals. So let's talk education first. Next. The L of the house was renovated into a visitor center, office, and modern kitchen to support the historic site. Also includes outdoor accessible restrooms. The large gift shop gives us a place for visitors to start the journey into the life of Hail and his family. The kitchen supports the historic kitchen, which is kind of what's in my background here, which includes cooking demonstrations. It creates a great start and end point for students that come and visit, many of which actually visit free of charge thanks to a special grant from the SBM Foundation. We also are working on getting some new interpretive signs and maps around the property to better support the casual visitor who comes along, perhaps to walk through the forest area, or perhaps comes to the weekly Coventry, I got to make sure I say that right now that I'm in Connecticut, Coventry Farmers Market, which brings somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3,000 people every weekend right to our site. We're working with the town of Coventry to build out the sidewalks, make ourselves more connected with the community, so somebody will be able to take a walk or ride a bike from downtown Coventry all the way to the Hail Homestead. Next slide. We also worked with the State Preservation Office to renovate historic barns into usable spaces for facility rentals. And when I say facility rentals, I almost entirely mean weddings. We have a lot of brides who really like this location. It sort of fits that New England look in so many ways, the red barns and the stone and all that sort of thing. We've got a great spot tucked behind the barns where renters can set up their music, their food, their whatever they need for their weddings. It's been a few minutes since I've had mine, so I can't remember all the details. The State Historic Preservation Office was concerned about the historic floor within the barn. So we actually have created a special hatch that you can open and see the original historic floor that is now placed below the modern floor. And so we're really thrilled about the way these came out, the partnerships that we had through this. We hope that you come out for a program whenever we're able to reopen. Maybe recommend a wedding there. That wouldn't hurt us either. So let's go ahead and keep on. Since we're talking about barns, we'll keep on talking about barns. And I'm going to turn it back to Bob to talk a little bit about the barn at Palmer Warner House, 1740s house that has some of its most significant history between about the 1930s and the 1970s. So this barn was in major failure. And Bob, let you take it from there.
Sure. As Aaron just said, honestly, the barn here, first of all, Palmer Warner is located in East Haddam. If any of you who are not familiar with that particular area or Palmer Warner in general, but the project the barn really by 2017, 2018 was just in really poor shape. So Landmarks, at that time was just prior to when I arrived, had embarked upon a campaign to redo the barn. We signed an agreement with a gentleman that I mentioned earlier, who's done some earlier work for us, Mike Einsteidl of Yankee Restoration, who fashions himself as really a timber framer. And he, essentially rebuilt the barn from foundation to the rafters, essentially as a team of one, which it's pretty remarkable. If you move to the next slide, you can see the progression and the final product. That's sort of it in place and kind of removing the roof and, the sideboards and clapboards and that sort of thing. So next, please. So that's essentially the finished product from the outside. The inside, Mike was able to basically fashion two original stalls and put them back in place. So Landmarks right now, we are discussing ideas as to what we want this particular structure to do. I mean, we talked about visitor services going on there and some interpretation, that sort of thing. But it's a remarkable building. It's really been an addition to that particular landscape, and it was finished in I want to say spring of 2019. So,
right. And that visitor experience part is still, you know, an ongoing conversation. The current conversation is something to the effect of restrooms or in a small office in that, that garage part that is to the right of that image. There's a lot more things to be thought about here. Let's go ahead on to the next image where we can see the house itself. We had a great guy from East Haddam News take the picture of the house that we'll show. George Fellner took this image, so I want to give him credit where credit is due. He had the lighting all right on it and everything, so it came out very well. The house was owned by Frederick Palmer, who was a restoration architect from the 30s to the 70s. Really was a leader in the kind of restoration movement in Connecticut. I mean, we talk a lot about the modernist movement in Connecticut, but also significant is Connecticut's contribution to colonial revival and preservation, restoration. So there really is a strong connection there. And Frederick was a major part of that. He had always said that this house was going to become part of Antiquities and Landmarks, or Connecticut Landmarks. So we knew we were going to get this house, and he passed away in the 1970s, and his partner, Howard Metzger, continued to own the house. He passed away due to a car accident in 2005. So we were essentially left with a house in the condition that it was the day that Howard left. And that has meant that we have a massive collection that needs to be sorted through to figure out what is being kept, what is not, how do we catalog all this? And so it has been a big process to go through that. We've received an IMLS grant for that interpretation. That's been ongoing. Bob, I don't know if you want to add a couple of things about this process that we've been going through here.
Sure. Aaron had mentioned what I find really interesting about the Palmer Warner House is it really is a time capsule. Landmarks assumed the property upon the unfortunate passing of Howard. So, the house truly is as is. And, Howard and Frederick were collectors, if you will. So they owned a lot of different things. I mean, from their record collection to, from things that they traveled and collected on their trips abroad, that sort of thing. So we have spent, or Landmarks has spent the better part of the last almost 4 years, perhaps, cataloging all the items in this particular house. We're not completely finished yet. We're, as of this time, our collections department, which is essentially a staff of 2, has cataloged 4,000 objects in the house. We have about, they've estimated it may take them up, maybe perhaps with a little good luck, 9 months or so to finish the cataloging the objects. It tells you the sheer size of the things that they owned in there. And, again, as a museum person, we spent, again, I come here from the museum and operations side of the house. It's fascinating because there are objects in that house that just tell tremendous stories. And, again, as a museum person, I'm a firm believer in that objects telling stories. So it's an undertaking.
Yeah. Go ahead to the next slide. So this leads to the question that we get, what's the future for this site? When will it open? There's a lot of questions to be answered. We think we can get to a point of effective interpretation within the next 3 years, but we still have issues of parking, how the landscape works together with it, ADA, American with Disabilities Act, access to the site, septic systems. There's a whole mixture of things. Turning a house, one of the things that I'll mention is, we often hear now that historic house museums are a bit of a dying breed. Turning a house into a museum isn't always the best way, but we believe that with this story of Howard and Frederick and Frederick's contributions and their lives and all these things, we feel it is an option that we have to pursue just because of the importance to the organization, but to this larger story. We may have other houses that have different futures in their future, but this house in particular, we're moving that direction. one more slide. I wanted to touch on the landscape. I understand that, maybe not a lot of you have been there, but we hope to have some open house type events. This landscape is something that we want to protect forever. Keeping it permanently protected but usable for visitors is a critical part of our role. We want to see that trails connect to surrounding open spaces, and we want to be a big part of the East Haddam community. So we hope that we can get you out there at some point so that you can see what's going on, see these great stone walls. It's about 40 acres and it's connected with other open spaces, and it will be a really valuable asset, however we can make sure that it is permanently protected. Next, please. So what's ahead? During COVID, we were able to be open by appointment at most of our sites. Palmer Warner is still by appointment only. We charge a little bit more for that appointment only type of thing because it's really complex to get it open and ready for somebody to walk through. So it takes a little bit of staff shifting to make that work. If you are interested, you should be in touch and come down there. But we do plan on, again, having some open house days if COVID cooperates, which it hasn't thus far. We also have restoration work. We can go ahead to the next slide as we talk about these. We have restoration work planned at some of our historic sites. Isham Terry, Bob, we just had the Butler's Pantry. If you want to talk about some of those things going on there.
Sure. Interesting story actually with Isham Terry. Those of you who are familiar with Hartford and coming down 84, the Isham Terry house, you can't miss it. It's right at sort of at the curve of I-84, right before you get to the tunnel there. I don't like to play favorites, but I'll be honest, the Isham Terry house is one of my favorites. I think the collection in there is tremendous. I guess it's a silver lining and everything, but in the, where was it? The spring, or no, the summer, one of those terrible rainstorms that we had over the summer, we found that the next day, our site administrator, Janet Colasino, came in and found that there was some leaking in the butler's pantry, which is off the parlor of the house. So unfortunately, we made the repairs, and our collections team, did what they needed to do to remove the collections and clean them and all that sort of thing. And everything was great. Everything's fine. They reinstalled the collections and everything looks great. And at the same time, we decided that, part of that educating the public, we, put out some social media posts about, what our collections team is doing, that sort of thing. And the silver lining in all of that is that a location scout from the History Channel happened to see our posts on social media, and they were scouting locations for season 3 of the History Channel's series called The Food That Built America. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a sort of program that looks into the Heinz company and the Hershey company, all these sort of food titans back at the turn of the century. Anyway, long story short, they came calling, and I had some conversations back with them, and essentially they shot the entire season at Isham Terry and at our Butler McCook house here in Hartford. So it was it's a real opportunity to see, for those people who really like, old houses, and it's a great opportunity for us to get a credit when the season kicks off, which is supposed to be sometime in the spring, but they haven't mentioned it. So again, Isham Terry is one of our older homes. It needs a lot of TLC. It constantly has, and I can see Randy nodding his head because my friend Randy Crawford here is quite familiar with Isham Terry. So, but again, I just think it's a tremendous piece. It's a great, and it's going to be a real anchor, hopefully, for the new the Downtown North project in Hartford. So we're really enthusiastic about it.
With any luck, you won't notice that those places in the TV show are Isham Terry because they transformed them. It was really amazing. The other thing to note is that this house has got a really amazing front door, and we're hoping to have that restored this year as well. So other bits there. Let's go ahead on to the next one. I know we're coming up on time here, so I want to kind of hammer through these last few. The next one that you'll have pop up is the Amasa Day House from 1816. Has a new roof, rebuilt chimneys, barn repaired. but we still have a boiler that needs replaced and asbestos in the house. But the bigger problem is that the community's changed around it. East Haddam is very different than whenever this house was sitting there, whenever the factories were running. How we interpret this site is kind of up for discussion. We've talked about things from an art center to just plain rental spaces to other things. All of our sites are under consideration for changes in their future. But Amasa Day is kind of my poster child for how can we be respectful to the community, how can we protect the site, and how can we find a future that may not be your standard historic house. Next, please. We'll sort of finish with our Hempstead houses. The Joshua Hempstead House, part of it from 1678, and the Nathaniel, which will be the next slide in a moment, from 1759. We consider them a duo that need changes to the visitor experience. There is some major renovation plan there, as well as to the interpretation. And Bob, I'll give you another shot at this one.
Sure. We spent a great deal of time last summer. In the fall, we replaced many of the clapboards primarily at the lower part of the house, which were a great deal of water damage and deterioration, that sort of thing. We installed new, historically accurate wooden V gutters in the front and back. What else do we do there? Pretty much a couple other things, but our work there is certainly not finished. We, we want to take a look at, given its age, obviously we want to take a look at some of the interior framing. We're gonna redo the, you can see in the background that fence along Hempstead Court in London that has to be replaced. That's on our project list for this year, as well as we are going to, we're taking a look at renovating the restroom in there. A lot of things that we need to do to improve the visitor experience. I mean, it needs, it needs a restroom. So all
we
these
can
things.
jump ahead to the next slide so we can see that as well.
Sure. So those of you who are familiar, these two are adjacent to each other within the same spot. This is the, we call it, internally we call it the Stone House. This is the Nathaniel Hempstead House. Our tours essentially begin here, but we've recognized that we need to do some work inside to really transform, to really make it a real a visitor center, if you will. We've talked about different ideas, again, sort of an artist colony. We've talked about lecture space, a bunch of different ways to sort of reinterpret the house, I guess, and try to look at the site a little bit differently, because again, it's a little jewel in the middle of, almost in the middle of downtown London. So
we actually had a conversation with the Yale Urban Design Workshop to possibly have some students take a look at it and do some thinking there too. So we'll go ahead to the last one here and wrap ourselves up. This is the Phelps Hathaway House in Suffield. We've got our site administrator, Lynn, on today. Hi, Lynn. This house is an amazing material culture site with some of the most important wallpaper in the United States. But it's also a tough legacy about a man, Oliver Phelps, whose relationship with Indigenous people was problematic. I don't have, I'm going to try to pull up the information that was sent to me today because I don't even try to pretend to know all of the details of how, his lifestyle. So I asked Lynn to give me a few words. So if you will, I'm just going to read some of hers. Inspired by the involvement with the International Sites of Conscience, the Phelps Hathaway House has investigated the complex relationship that Oliver Phelps had with the Seneca peoples during the settlement of the Phelps-Gorham Purchase of 1788. So from their youngest programs, Little Historian, to the Youth History Lab, and to our summer lecture series with invited scholars, we're dedicated to uncovering and sharing forthcoming research on this sensitive issue. And we are both lucky, but also cursed in some ways by his participation in both slavery and the unjust treatment of Native peoples. We're also looking to try to integrate these kind of conversations into the tour experience. Exploring maps of the Western Reserve, discussing his business deals with Indigenous peoples. And so there's been quite a bit of it. So I hope that you all will take a peek at that, and Lynn is a great resource on that. So I wanted to make sure we mentioned that, because we did get a question about Indigenous peoples that was sent ahead of time. And we are trying to address that at all of our sites, that we recognize that history tends to be old white men, and we want to change that story. And I do want to end with a statement that says, COVID put us on our heels, and we've worked really hard to find new sources to keep our doors open. We're really looking forward to 2021 as a year to be able to open again, knock on wood, and share these great stories. We look forward to a year where we try new things, challenge old assumptions, and we hope that you will be able to come back and share it with us. So that's where I will end, and give us a few minutes for some questions.
Great, thank you, Aaron and Robert. That was a fabulous presentation, and I really must commend you on the careful stewardship that you implore at all of these sites. I mean, it's really an awesome collection of resources, and being able to stay on top of maintenance and stewardship issues is quite a challenge, and I commend you for doing that. And also, historic house museums need to be relevant and active and used in the community, and you're really doing a great job of trying to think of different ways to use the sites and bring different audiences in, and you have to have different revenue streams. So my hat's off to you. You've got quite a lot on your plate, and a small but mighty staff to do it. And
that's right.
And I'll to our horn a little bit. A lot of those projects that you mentioned, I could say, oh, we had a little bit of a role in providing some funding or providing some guidance. So happy to have met you both and got caught up on what's going on at Connecticut Landmarks. And we look forward at Preservation Connecticut to keep our partnership together and assist you with all of these amazing sites that you have, because we don't own any properties except for our boarding house, and we have our hands full just taking care of that.
Well,
so
I will mention, Jay, Jane and I talked a little bit, and I said, if we can be using our sites in a unique way that would allow Preservation Connecticut to come in and offer programs or do things with them, we're fully interested in that kind of thing. And so there's been those kinds of conversations. So I really want to make sure that folks know that our organization is committed to building partnerships. So anybody that's listening, that if you're interested and would like to have those conversations, we're there for you.
Great. So I opened up the screen so we could see anyone who'd like to turn their cameras on and chat, but we did get something through the written chat. What are your practices for signage at the historic properties? Are there outdoor plaques?
It's a great question. That's actually one of the things that I did almost more than anything else whenever I was in Maryland was sort of National Park Service style signage on our sites. And so we have the ones that I mentioned at Hail Homestead are going to be similar in some ways to that National Park Service style angled type of interpretive panel up on some metal brackets. And the one that I'm excited about there will actually have a relief style building, so that it's tactile, so that you can actually feel and sense the actual design of the property and where all these pieces fit together. So it's a really kind of a unique thing. So there are some of our sites have a little bit, but we don't, to my mind, I think we need some more. And I've talked about this with the staff, that I would love to see more of these interpretive signs at our site, so that if you're just a casual visitor who's just wandering through the property or just wants to see the grounds, that you can really engage with that history. So you will be seeing more of that, and that, it's a big thing. So not as many as I would like right now, but we're going to have more. Thanks. Great question.
It's a great, if I can add on, it's a great question, because, there are at least, Hail Homestead comes to mind, but Bellamy Faraday is actually, as I consider it, part of the visitor experience. A good part of the visitor experience is the landscape. And there are outbuildings on that landscape that are crying for interpretation. So it's
Right.
definitely on our list, but it's a great question.
Great, thank you. Maria asks, is there difficulty in finding craftsmen for restoration work?
I'd like to take that. Yeah, the answer is a unequivocal yes. It's really, really difficult. And when you do find one, scheduling them is really, really difficult because they're really highly in demand. But it's a really good question, and it's a real challenge. It just is. Finding people that understand that you're not just driving a nail, a 2x4 into, you know, a tree. You know, there's plenty of handy people out there that could, you know, perhaps build you a set of stairs, but finding individuals and organizations that, you know, have an appreciation for what it is they're actually doing, I find it in my 2 years here is a real challenge.
And something that we hear about quite a bit as well. Very concerned about being able to train the next generation of these craftsmen and how we're going to try to foster that.
Sure. So if any of you out there are aware of perhaps anyone who is interested, please send them my way. I can give you my email address.
I know that, you know, the organization had has a program called YEP, Youth Employment Program, that was training students to do more tourism related, museum experience types of things. And we're sort of taking a break from it so we can reevaluate. And that has been a conversation I've actually had with some folks from Historic Deerfield, 1772 Foundation, about, you know, trade training and what would that mean for sort of the Springfield to Hartford region, you know, some of the lower incomes communities within them, and how could we maybe do something. So it's a long term, but it's a big picture vision that how we get there. Jane, I wanted to mention, I forgot this one. Somebody had sent in a question ahead of time that was, how can preservation of these sites be prioritized better, more so than use and income? And I think it's a really great question that you're going to be seeing us work our way through over the coming year, making some of those decisions. You can evaluate it based on how many people visit a site, and you could rule out some of our sites that have really low visitation. Or you could base it on endowments and which ones have big endowments, and therefore we keep them operating even if nobody visits. But then you also have the ones where the story is really compelling and it's really complex. Getting out to East Haddam isn't easy, but that is such an amazing story. You have to tell it. So how we connect all those pieces is just as vital. So there's a lot that's being poured into it to figure out. So that's another aspect.
Great, thank you, Aaron. I was just going to bring that up as I was checking the list to see if we answered all the questions. I'll open it up to the room if anyone has another question.
I think the only other thing I would mention off of that list that got sent around is that I noticed several people that had registered from kind of the Darien southern part, southwestern part of the state. We don't have a lot of presence there. Would love to work with folks from that part of the state to really make sure that at least we have a recognition of our work, even if it's existing in other places. You know, getting to Bellamy, Faraday isn't as far from Fairfield County. So, you know, we'd love to be able to make some of those kinds of connections.
Well, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Tim.
This is in Enfield, Connecticut, and there's an 1865 barn on a property, and we want to move it to a 1780s house in a back field to rebuild the barn. But it means we have to take down the barn and build it up again. And I don't know if anybody's incredibly interested in that that story or that you know, that's what I'm going to say right now.
Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I was just going to say, so have you, you're looking to do that? You haven't taken it down yet?
No, haven't
Oh,
taken it
wow.
down yet.
Okay.
And it's not in bad shape. The structure is good, but the house, it was built a very long time ago, but it's now a school, that particular property. And the house was built in 1782, and then they built the barn in 1865. And they're kind of anxious to get the barn moved to another.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds exactly what we have our circuit rider staff for.
Oh, okay.
So our field service could come in and take a look at the property, see what the
Oh.
issues are, what your goals are, and help devise a plan of what's appropriate and how to move forward.
That would be great.
And
I would love that.
Jane, you may want to also, Tim might be interested if you don't know already, is the barn program this coming up weekend.
Aha.
No, I didn't know about that.
So the post office is dropping a new series of stamps on Sunday, celebrating the barn. And so our partners in New Hampshire pulled together some speakers. So there's a Zoom presentation Sunday at 4. It's in the middle of football. There's a lot of competition for everyone's time these days, but 4 o'clock, a Zoom meeting. You can get the link on our website for Preservation Alliance of New Hampshire. And there'll be a presentation for the whole group. And then at the end of the program, we'll break out by state so we can talk more specifically about some of the barn resources available in Connecticut.
So you might
That's
find
great.
yourself some barn enthusiasts.
Yeah, that would be great. Because, you know, my family has been in dairy farming for like 8 generations now. And I'm not one of the dairy farms, but when I was in that barn, just to take a look at maybe 3 months ago, I thought of all the barns that have been destroyed in Enfield and how that affected my family as well. And that's why I'm working on this. So.
Well, yeah, we certainly would like to connect with you to see how we can to help you with that.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Does anyone have anything else? We are over our time.
Well, again, I will say thank you to everybody. And again, if folks are watching this later, feel free to connect with us and on our website, ctlandmarks.org, and I'm happy to discuss our work and what we do. So again, thank you. First, I'll say thank you to Bob for him telling you all about all these things and our great staff that we have. I see some of them on here today. And again, thank you to Jane and the Preservation Connecticut group, Stacy, Jordan, all of you for getting us to come out today.
Well, it was our pleasure hosting you today. Great to get caught up. And thank you everyone for joining in. And please remember, Preservation Connecticut is a membership organization. So if you don't have your memberships up to date, we would love to have you renew or join. And next week, we'll have Sarah Bronin talking with us about her initiative, Desegregate Connecticut, and some initiatives to bring some equity to our land use in Connecticut. So we'd love to have you join us for that and see the preservation angle on zoning laws that we're looking to make some tweaks to. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. And this recording will be available, so share it with your friends.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you.
Have a good day.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.